time that he encountered my reptilian, I had to refer to him as Captain because his name was so incredibly long that I could not pronounce it. And I said to him, look, that is just, like Erica was saying, she's not gifted in math. Well, I'm not gifted in seeing all different letters kind of stuck together that looked a mile long. So I said, do you mind if I just call you Captain? And he laughingly agreed that was okay. He totally understood that it actually hurt to read his name. I mean, because we were speaking telepathically, it hurt. Yes?
No, I was just amazed at
okay.
What would it be, like a long Russian name or something, or
kind of, sort of, but really not. It took me years. I had parts of the name, and then as I focused on it, I came up with Quansecutek, and that's not the whole thing. There's still, some consonants in there that are strictly consonants, and then an ending that almost sounds like a song. I mean, it's almost like a lyric. So it was too much. So that's when that's when I affectionately called him Captain, and he affectionately enjoyed that. Actually, he laughed, and reptilians do laugh, and they have a sense of humor. But as I said, I couldn't find any information on this being, but before that time, before he entered, I want to say about a year, I had attempted to reach out to the UFO community about experiences that I was having with what are now called grays, that in my frame of reference back in 89 and 90, I called them the Mad Hornets, and I was horrified. I was in so much fear. I couldn't stop the experiences. I felt they were very intrusive. And then I had just floating, what I would call at the time, I just called them floating balls of light. They were an electric blue, sometimes a neon blue, probably about 6 inches in diameter, sometimes even a foot. They would just, go across the room like they lived there, as well as little tiny white lights that would kind of zip around. So there was some paranormal experiences going on, and I was just thinking I'm losing my mind, and that's okay. Maybe there's ghosts or spirits. But anyway, after realizing that he was a reptilian,
Bridget.
Yes.
May I ask you to hold that thought? It is time for a break for everybody.
Oh, you got it.
That way I by the way, found all the Nightwish songs.
Awesome. That'd be great.
For about 4.5 minutes, folks. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Thank you for listening to Wolf Spirit Radio. We are a dedicated group of individuals bringing unique programs, ideas, concepts to our shows. We invite you all to explore the programming and shows here on Wolf Spirit Radio, Sunday through Saturday, 7 days a week. You'll find inspiration, information, and entertainment. And join the chat rooms too. Connect with other listeners as well as the host right here on wolfspiritradio.com.
Hi. Okay, back to what I was saying. Well, let's see. Like I was saying, that going back to Captain, I was saying his name, and it was extremely difficult for me to pronounce. And actually, I learned his name kind of in the middle of my experiences, which if I count now in my head would be about 9. So basically, this part of my life started what I would call the Screaming Alien Festival kind of thing. But Captain, and that's what I'm going to call him, much easier to say, he kind of came to the rescue, and he took away all of the negative aspects that were going on in my life with other beings. And basically one night, how it started, I woke up and there was this blue electric mist all over the floor. And I looked out my window and I saw a light, and it was about 4 feet in diameter, and I thought it was a craft or something, and that they were coming back to harass me. And I decided, that's it, I'm not going to be afraid anymore. And I was calm, and I was filled with fear. So I followed this little blue, misty, electric blue light that I had never seen before. So it was really kind of hard to discover or explain the color at that time. But I noticed that this this round thing was hovering over my garden, and I thought, oh, they're not going to do this. They're not going to radiate my garden. That's where I get my food. So determined, and at that time, I thought I'm going to use the Bible. I'm going to go after them with a rosary. And when I turned the corner, and I passed the light, there was my speakers, okay? I don't think I have a thing that turns down speakers. Hold on. Yes, I do. All right. Is this better?
Yes, and I got to call a curl back. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, basically, I was just following this light. I was determined. And when I turned the corner, I saw the light, and there was a creature about 7 to 7.5 feet tall, in my frame of reference, and I noticed he had blackish brown skin, and I couldn't really see him. As Misha said to me, he had a humanoid figure, but he looked like an NFL player. I mean, he had no neck. His muscles were just connected with these huge cords all the way to his shoulders. Later I was to find that his eyes, when he did show himself to me, were a yellowish orange with a vertical slit. He had a beading that was snake-like skin, almost, I used to call them like coffee beans all put together, but it was snake-like skin, and I was screaming and yelling, get off my property, who do you think you are? I want all of this to end, you need to go away. And immediately the energy changed, and he spoke to my head, and I thought, he's talking to me telepathically, and I'm screaming at him verbally. So right then things changed, and we were speaking telepathically. He let me scream and scream, and what he was actually doing was he had a device in his hand, which it was about an 8-inch window pane of glass with moving colors, and he could use his hands or talons, these long black talons, to maneuver pictures and images. Now, in my frame of reference, what do you call that? You don't call it anything but something really amazing. So he turned the object to me, and I was like, wow, I'd never seen where you could touch something and move pictures around. So today we call that an iPad. The only difference with what he had was that there was no backing. No backing at all. It was just clear. So as the years have gone through, and I've seen cell phones, and then we see laptops, and the colors start to look familiar, and now that we have tablets, it just always brings it back to me. I used to look at the top of a laptop and think if I could rip a laptop off and make it a little bit smaller and let the pictures move with my touch, I would have exactly what he had. So that distracted me, and he just said, I'm a scientist, and I'm here to collect data. And he just started showing me the data on this, I guess you would call it a tablet. I noticed that his vertebrae were very large, and they bulged out almost like the size of a coffee mug, which one time, well, several times I touched him, but one time I remember touching his back and telling him, you have, your vertebrae is so large in some areas, they reminded me of coffee mugs sticking out, because his spine, when he would walk to bend over, would almost protrude in certain areas. So he would basically say that it's very interesting and understandable.
Carol, turn your speakers down, please.
Okay, how's that?
Go ahead, Bridget.
Okay. And he was very task-oriented in the beginning. He was interested in me very much, but more so in, like, he was on a task. And he was just interested in me. I don't recall a tale. I just remember this NFL football player, and I would kind of walk around with him as he walked around my house and continually to ask questions, and he would not answer them. And I think that was the most frustrating thing in the beginning, was not getting any answers and continually to be inquisitive. Later, like I said, when he was telling me his name, that was more of a personal experience, one-on-one, where he was actually facing me. And I had many experiences with him. I think my most favorite, or there were several, where he was standing in front of me, and I had no fear, even the first time that I approached him. All I got was a sense of overwhelming, unconditional love and a reciprocation from him of a love I hadn't felt before. So when I would kind of look into his eyes, I would notice the slit, and that wouldn't scare me. And I would start studying him closer, and he asked me, he said, "Do you want to touch me?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And he was very delighted at that. And I realized that his skin, like I said, had the coffee beans, but when you touched him, it was very smooth, like snake skin. And then my eyes shifted to his shoulders, and I took my hands and I moved towards him, and I started down his arm, and he turned his arm in, and he sent me this loving feeling of how pleased he was that I was accepting him, that I was saying the things that I was. And he was delighted and kept saying, "I'm so glad that you see me." And then I got to his elbow, and I noticed as I grazed over his hand that he had very, very long fingernails, and he turned it towards me so that the opposite side of his skin was exposed. And at that point, I just kind of thought that his scales should have been dimensional, but they were soft to the touch, and I expected to feel a lot of small bumps. And the inner side was kind of like a snake and a frog, and kind of moist. And he wanted me to continue, and I went down to his hip area and then down to his feet. But I have to go back and say that his hand, with these long talons that were so sharp, also had webbing in between them. And immediately I held up my hand and said, "How in the world do you get anything done with these sharp talons and this intricate webbing, like this translucent webbing?" And silly me, I start moving my hand and flailing it back and forth to say, "Look, you could cut yourself." And he gave out this huge belly laugh. That he just thought that was the most hysterical thing he had heard. And so then I started laughing. And so that was kind of the relationship that we had. I would talk and he would laugh, which I don't know is all that great all the time, but it was pretty great at the time. And he had these four sharp talons, and then also his feet, when I was going back to his feet, I remember that his feet had these notches in them, but he kind of opened up his toes, and I can see that those were webbed as well. And he would just chuckle because I kept asking him, "How do you get around without getting hurt? These are very complicated features." And it was all just wonderful and beautiful. Now, I have to also say that I don't recall, because this is something that seems to be all over the internet with people. I personally don't recall a sexual encounter with him in those days. It was more like I would be in an experience with him, and I would remember, but there would be an in-between time that I do not recall. And then I would call the end of the experience. So there's an in-between missing time. And the love exchange reminded me years later, of the movie Cocoon, when they sit in that pool and they share that love, if that makes any sense. And it was just all telepathic, and I have never been able to forget that feeling. And like I said, there were lots of other experiences. I was missing time. I was brought aboard a craft, and that was the time getting close to where we said goodbye. I was on board a craft. I was shown children. I yelled at little gray beings. They were trying to give me a shot so that I would forget, and I didn't want to forget. And then he showed me these children, and after that, I think the next experience would have been several experiences and conversations, and then the last one, he opened up what I know to be now at that same circle of light in my kitchen and told me that he had to leave. And I protested and I cried, and I didn't want him to go. I sobbed. And I never forget that. I will never forget that. But what he said to me was that he was leaving, he had a mission to complete, and that he was needed badly and had to go, and tried to comfort me, tried to tell me not to cry, and that he was coming back. He said it may be 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be old and probably already have had kids, and you won't know where I am, that kind of thing. But he just basically said, you have a mission. And he stepped 1 foot back into this light, which now is described as a portal, and the portal collapsed into a teeny, tiny, small ball, little bit of light, and just poof,